after giving Mary her blessing, good Saint Anne reclined in her daughter's arms and died in perfect peace. She was 56 years old. As the angels carried Mary back to her cell in the temple, her loving heart suffered a keen sense of loneliness. However, while praying for Saint Anne, she gratefully thanked the Lord for having given her such a perfect mother and for having showered so many graces on her parents in life and death. One day, not long afterward, for the first time in years, Mary's angels again became visible to her and said, "Soon thou shalt see him whom thy soul desires. In order to console his beloved, he afflicts them. In order to be sought after, he withdraws." Then gradually, by a series of mystical experiences, God endowed Mary's pure soul with new gifts and tranquilized her spirit. At last, having raised her to a still higher spiritual plane, he again revealed himself to her in an exalted vision, which amply rewarded all her suffering and loving anxiety. Once again overwhelmed with joy, Mary prayed, "O infinite goodness and wisdom, purify my heart and renew it, so that it may be humble, penitent, and pleasing in thy sight." The Blessed Virgin said to Saint Bridget of Sweden, "As soon as I understood that there was a God, I was always solicitous and fearful for my salvation. And when I heard more fully that God was also my creator and judge of all my actions, I loved him intensely, and every hour I feared and pondered lest I should offend him in word or deed. Then when I heard that he had given a law to his people and wrought so many wonders with them, I firmly resolved in my mind to love naught but him, and all worldly things became most bitter to me. Hearing that this same God was to redeem the world and be born of a virgin, I was filled with such love for her that I thought of naught but God. I withdrew as much as possible from the conversation and presence of others. All that I could have I gave to the poor, reserving to myself only scanty food and clothing. Nothing pleased me but God. Ever did I long in my heart to live to the time of his birth, if perchance I might be the unworthy handmaid of the Mother of God. And to Venerable Mother Mary of Agreda, it is true that on account of the blessings of the Lord, sin was impossible in me, but this was hidden from me. I saw that as far as it depended on myself alone, I could fall. Thus God left me in holy fear of sinning during my pilgrimage. From the instant of my conception until my death, I never lost this fear, but rather grew in it with time. And to Saint Elizabeth of Schonau, I want to teach you the prayers that I said while I was in the temple. When my father and mother left me in the temple, I resolved in my heart to have God as my Father, and I frequently and devoutly pondered what I might do to please God so that he would deign to give me his grace. I studied the law of God, and of all the precepts of the divine law I kept 3 with particular care in my heart, namely, Thou shalt love the Lord thy God with thy whole heart and with thy whole strength. Thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. I kept these precepts in my soul, and I quickly understood all the virtues which they contain. A soul cannot have any virtue if it does not love God with all its heart, for from this love the abundance of grace descends into the soul. But after descending, it does not remain, but flows away like water, if the soul does not hate its enemies, that is, its sins and vices. I always used to rise in the middle of the night, and with as much longing and will and love as I could, I used to beg Almighty God to give me the grace to observe those 3 precepts and all the other commandments of His law. And I used to pray these 7 petitions. 1. I prayed for the grace to fulfill the precept of charity, to love God with all my heart. 2. I prayed for the grace to love my neighbor according to His will and pleasure, and that He should make me love all that He Himself loves. 3. I prayed that He make me hate and flee all that He hates. 4. I prayed for humility, patience, kindness, gentleness, and all virtues by which I might become pleasing in His sight. 5. I prayed that He should let me see the time when that most holy Virgin would be born, who was to give birth to the Son of God, and that He preserve my eyes that I might see her, my ears that I might hear her, my tongue that I might praise her, my hands that I might work for her, my feet that I might walk as her servant, and my knees that I might adore the Son of God in her lap. 6. I prayed for the grace of obeying the orders and rules of the high priest of the temple. 7. I prayed that God should preserve the temple and all His people for His service. I assure you that as I considered myself a most worthless creature and one unworthy of God's grace, therefore I begged Him to give me grace and virtues. The Lord did with me what a musician does with his harp. The musician sets and tunes all the strings so that they give forth a sweet and harmonious melody, and then he sings while playing on it. Mary. Then, after giving Mary her blessing, good Saint Anne reclined in her daughter's arms and died in perfect peace. She was 56 years old. As the angels carried Mary back to her cell in the temple, her loving heart suffered a keen sense of loneliness. However, while praying for Saint Anne, she gratefully thanked the Lord for having given her such a perfect mother and for having showered so many graces on her parents in life and death. One day, not long